There are some stories in life that are easy to tell, and there are others that sit quietly in your heart for decades. Today's story is one of those. I'm Brian Smith, and this episode of Smith History is deeply personal. In fact, I debated for a long time about whether I should tell it at all. But my family history is not only about the victories and the laughter, sometimes it's about the fragile moments when life changes in an instant. And today, I want to tell you about my Uncle Dale McCarley. Uncle Dale was one of the most important adults in my life when I was growing up. If you ever met him, there were two things you would immediately remember. First was his laugh, loud, contagious, and impossible to ignore. The second was his voice. It had this gravelly tone, the kind of voice that sounded like it had been shaped by years of hard work and storytelling. Even now, more than 40 years later, I can still hear his voice in my mind. In 1975, when I was a struggling teenager trying to figure out life, Uncle Dale did something that would change my path forever. He took me to church. It might sound simple, but that single act introduced me to faith and set me on a course that would shape my entire life. Sometimes the most important turning points in our lives happen quietly. A car ride, a conversation, a simple invitation. For me, that turning point was Uncle Dale saying, "Come with me to church." Dale also had a special patience with me. When I was a senior in high school, my parents and brothers had grown pretty much frustrated with my behavior. But Uncle Dale seemed to understand me in a way that others didn't. He opened his home to me in Upper Sandusky, Ohio. That wasn't a small gesture. Taking in a teenager who was still figuring things out takes patience and a generous heart. Dale had both. One memory stands out clearly, even 50 years later. My senior year, I made the varsity basketball team. But there was one problem. I didn't have proper basketball shoes. So Uncle Dale did what Uncle Dale always did. He got in the car and started driving. We went through 3 counties searching for the right pair. 3 counties. Today you just order them online. But in those days it meant miles of driving and store after store. Eventually he found them. And because of him, I stepped onto that court prepared. That's the kind of man he was. He also taught me how to drive. Now, my dad was many things, but patient driving instructor was not one of them. Uncle Dale, on the other hand, had nerves of steel. He would sit there calmly while I tried to master the clutch and the steering wheel, probably praying silently the entire time. And somehow he got me through it. We also played sports together constantly. Basketball in the driveway. And I still remember playing catch with my brother Jeff and Uncle Dale. Dale had this way of throwing a curveball with a softball, something I thought was pure magic as a kid. Those afternoons felt like they would last forever. But life rarely unfolds the way we expect, and sometimes the smallest decisions lead to the biggest consequences. In the spring of 1981, my parents were preparing to move again. They were living in Bucyrus, Ohio, and the move was incredibly simple. Just 1 mile down the road. 1 mile. After years of moving across the country during the 1970s, packing up 5 boys and an entire household, this move should have been the easiest one of all. Through all those years, we had experienced close calls, but never tragedy, not once, until that evening. My parents asked Uncle Dale to help with the move. He lived about 20 miles away, but that never mattered to him. Helping people was simply what he did. So he drove his truck from Upper Sandusky down to Bucyrus, loaded up furniture, and prepared to make the short 1 mile trip to the new apartment. A mile. That's all it was. Some of the details are blurred now, 45 years later. But this much we know. Dale pulled out of the apartment complex and onto the road. Then, almost immediately, he pulled over to the side of the street and turned on his hazard lights. Why? No one knows. He was driving alone. And when you're alone, sometimes the answers disappear with the moment. A witness later said Dale walked to the back of the truck and knelt down. It was early evening. That quiet time of day when the sun is setting and shadows begin to stretch across the road. Visibility was fading. The witness believed Dale was looking for something. Maybe a strap had loosened. Maybe a piece of furniture shifted. Maybe something had fallen off the truck. We will never know. But his head was angled toward the street. And in that vulnerable moment, a passing car struck him in the head. The impact knocked him into the street. He was severely injured. By some miracle, no other vehicle struck him after he fell. But the damage had already been done. I don't remember exactly how I got the call. I believe it was my cousin Mary Lou. She and I were close, and she told me what had happened to her dad. I remember getting in the car and driving to Marion General Hospital that night. I knew that hospital well. I was born in that hospital. The hospital waiting room was filled with worry, fear, and a lot of unanswered questions. Doctors told us the prognosis was grave. Dale had suffered a catastrophic head injury. His brain was swelling dangerously. He was rushed into surgery. I went home later that night. This was long before cell phones or the internet. The next morning, I called Mary Lou. Her dad had survived the surgery, but the situation was still critical. He remained in a coma. Days passed, and then came a moment I will never forget. Mary Lou told me what the surgeon had explained to her. The pressure inside Dale's skull had been so severe that when doctors opened the cranium, the build-up pressure forced brain matter outward. To save his life, surgeons had to remove part of his brain to relieve the swelling and bleeding. It was the kind of medical description that stays with you forever, even decades later. Weeks passed. Against the odds, Dale survived. Eventually, he came out of the coma and began a long road of rehabilitation. I remember visiting him for the first time after he returned home. My brother Jeff went with me. I needed the reinforcement because deep down I knew things would be different. And they were. The Uncle Dale I had known, the booming laugh, the lively personality, much of that had been changed by the injury. Brain trauma can do that. It doesn't just affect memory or speech. Sometimes it changes the very essence of a person. During that visit, Dale kept repeating the same phrase again and again. Jeff and I talked about that later. It was heartbreaking. And yet, we were grateful he was still alive. Over time, Dale slowly improved. Not completely, not to the way he had been before, but he regained speech, some independence, and much of his physical ability after extensive rehabilitation. And one thing never left him: his faith. About a year after the accident, I remember Dale stood up in church and gave his testimony. He praised God for sparing his life. Think about that for a moment. A man who had lost so much, standing up publicly to thank God. That moment said everything who Uncle Dale truly was. He lived many more years, and in 2007, he passed away, too young, at age 66. I went to his memorial service, and I spent time talking with my cousin Mary Lou. We remembered the great times, the laughter, the basketball games, the long drives searching for shoes, and all the ways Dale had believed in me when I needed it most. When I think about Uncle Dale now, I still hear the laugh. I still hear the gravelly voice. And I still remember the man who took a confused teenager to church and unknowingly changed his life forever. That evening in 1981 was tragic, but it also reminds me of something important. Uncle Dale had gotten hurt because he stopped to help someone, to make sure a job was done right, to make sure someone else's belongings were safe. That generous heart never left him. And that is part of Smith history, separating the Smith from the myth. May Uncle Dale rest in peace until we meet again. My name is Brian Smith, and we are history.